In the village of Kiboko, nestled between the great baobab trees and the winding Mara River, there lived a boy named Jabari. His name meant brave one, though he often felt anything but brave. Jabari lived with his grandmother, Bibi Zawadi, in a small mud brick house with a thatched roof that leaked when the rains came. His grandmother made her living selling clay pots in the market, her gnarled hands shaping the earth into vessels that held water, grain, and the hopes of modest families. Every morning, Jabari would help his grandmother carry her pots to the market square. The clay vessels were beautiful in their simplicity, smooth, round, and painted with red ochre designs that told stories of their ancestors. But Jabari's eyes never lingered on his grandmother's handiwork. Instead, they were drawn across the market to where Kofi, the chief's son, held court with his friends. Kofi was everything Jabari was not. He wore dashikis made of the finest indigo cloth, threaded with golden patterns that caught the sunlight. Around his neck hung amber beads the color of honey, and on his feet were leather sandals with brass buckles that clicked importantly against the ground. Kofi never carried anything himself. Servants followed him everywhere, holding parasols to shade him from the sun and carrying whatever purchases he made. One day, Jabari whispered to himself as he arranged his grandmother's clay pots, I will have what Kofi has. I will wear fine cloth and eat rich food. I will never have to work with my hands in the dirt. Bibi Zawadi, whose ears were sharper than her failing eyes, heard her grandson's words. She said nothing, but her weathered face creased with concern. That night, as they ate their simple meal of ugali and greens by the fire, she told him a story. Long ago, she began, there was a bird who wanted to fly higher than all the others. He was jealous of the eagle who soared above the mountains. So he tied heavy stones to his wings, thinking the weight would make him stronger. Instead, he could not fly at all. Jabari nodded politely, but his mind was elsewhere. He had heard his grandmother's stories 1,000 times, each one filled with talking animals and impossible magic. He loved her, but he was tired of being poor. He was tired of other children laughing at his worn-out clothes and his calloused hands. He was tired of being invisible. The next day, opportunity arrived in the form of a merchant from the city. The merchant, a round man with rings on every finger, was looking for someone to help him carry goods from the river port to the market. He promised payment in silver coins, more money than Jabari had ever held. Let me go, Bibi, he pleaded with his grandmother. I will work hard and earn money, real money, not just a few copper pennies from selling pots. Bibi Zawadi's eyes filled with sadness, but she nodded. Go then, my grandson. But remember, a tree that grows too quickly has shallow roots. For 3 months, Jabari worked for the merchant. The labor was hard, much harder than helping his grandmother, but the pay was good. He saved every silver coin, hiding them in a pouch beneath his sleeping mat. At night, he would count them by firelight, imagining all the things he would buy. When he finally had enough, Jabari went to the cloth merchant and bought a dashiki as fine as any Kofi owned. He purchased leather sandals and a string of beads. He even bought pomade for his hair and scented oil for his skin. When he looked at himself in the merchant's small mirror, he barely recognized the boy staring back. He looked rich. He looked important. He looked like he belonged. The next morning, dressed in his finery, Jabari walked through the market with his head held high. People stared, and he felt a thrill of pride. Finally, he was someone worthy of notice. Jabari, called out Jabari. Is that you? Come, join us. His heart soared. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He walked over to where Kofi sat with his friends, other wealthy young men from prominent families. They made room for him on their bench, and Jabari sat down, trying to appear casual, as if he had always belonged there. "Your clothes are fine," Kofi said, examining Jabari's dashiki. "Did your grandmother finally sell enough pots to afford such things?" The other boys laughed, and Jabari felt his face grow hot. "My grandmother's pots are of the finest quality," he said defensively. Of course," Kofi said smoothly. "But clay is still just clay, isn't it? Now, my father just purchased new bronze bowls from traders who came all the way from the great kingdoms of the north. Real treasure, not peasant cookware." Jabari bit his tongue. He wanted to argue, but he also wanted to belong. So, he laughed along with the others, even though the sound felt hollow in his throat. Over the following weeks, Jabari spent more and more time with Kofi and his circle. To keep up, he had to spend his remaining coins on things he had never needed before: sweet cakes from the baker, palm wine at the drinking house, gifts for the group when they went to festivals. His money disappeared like water into sand. But something else was disappearing too. Jabari stopped helping his grandmother in the mornings, claiming he was too tired from his late nights with his new friends. He stopped visiting her at the market, embarrassed by her simple clay pots and weathered hands. When she asked him to share meals with her, he made excuses, saying he had already eaten with Kofi. Bibi Zawadi never complained. She simply watched her grandson with those knowing eyes and continued her work, shaping clay into beauty with patient hands. One evening, Kofi invited Jabari to a feast at the chief's compound. "My father is hosting traders from across the land. There will be music, dancing, and food like you've never tasted. You should come." Jabari's last coins went toward a new wrapper cloth to bring as a gift. He arrived at the chief's compound as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The compound was magnificent. Large buildings with painted walls, courtyards filled with flowering plants, and torches that turned the night into dancing light. The feast was indeed unlike anything Jabari had experienced. There were platters of roasted goat, fish cooked in coconut sauce, rice seasoned with saffron, and fruits he couldn't name. Musicians played drums and thumb pianos, while dancers swirled in costumes that flashed with colored beads. It was a celebration of wealth and power, and Jabari sat among it all, trying to convince himself that he belonged. But as the night wore on, he began to notice things. He noticed how Kofi's friends talked about people, mocking the poor, sneering at those they considered beneath them. They heard them boast about possessions and power, never about kindness or wisdom. He watched them waste food, tossing perfectly good meat to the dogs while he knew families in the village who had eaten nothing but thin porridge for days. "Did you hear about the old pot seller?" one of Kofi's friends said loudly, and Jabari's attention snapped to the conversation. "Someone knocked over her table today at the market, all her pots shattered. The old fool just sat there crying in the dust." Jabari's blood turned to ice. "What old woman?" he asked, though he already knew. "Some grandmother who makes clay pots, Zawadi or something. Who cares? They were just cheap pots anyway."
Jabari stood so quickly, his bench tipped over. Without a word of explanation, without even a goodbye. He ran from the compound. He ran through the dark streets, his fine sandals slipping on the stones, his expensive dashiki catching on thorn bushes. He ran until he reached his grandmother's house. The door was open, and in the dim light of a single oil lamp, he found Bibi Zawadi sitting on the floor. Around her were shards of broken pottery, dozens of pots representing weeks of work, all destroyed. Her hands were bleeding from trying to gather the pieces, and tears had made tracks through the dust on her weathered face. "Bibi," Jabari whispered, falling to his knees beside her. She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw not anger, but infinite sadness. "Jabari, my child, what are you doing here? Should you not be at the chief's feast?" "I'm so sorry," he said, and the words came out as a sob. "I'm so sorry, Bibi. I have been a fool. I have been worse than a fool. I have been cruel." He helped her stand and led her to her sleeping mat. He cleaned and bandaged her hands with strips torn from his expensive wrapper cloth. He swept up the broken pottery, each shard a reminder of his betrayal. And then, as the moon rose high above the village, he sat beside his grandmother and wept. "All this time, I thought being rich would make me happy. I thought having fine clothes and important friends would make me somebody. But I was already somebody. I was your grandson. I had your love and your wisdom, and I threw it all away for things that don't matter." Bibi Zawadi placed her bandaged hand on his head. "My child, you have learned a hard lesson, but you have learned it. That is what matters." "But your pots," Jabari said. "All your work, gone. And I wasn't even here to help you." His grandmother smiled, and despite everything, there was peace in her expression. "Pots can be made again. Clay is patient, and so am I. The question is, what will you do now?" Jabari looked at his grandmother, this woman who had raised him with nothing but love, who had worked her fingers to the bone to keep them fed and sheltered, who had never once made him feel ashamed of their poverty. In that moment, he understood what true wealth was. "I will help you make new pots, if you'll still have me." And so, the next morning, Jabari woke before dawn. He took off his fine dashiki and folded it carefully away. He removed his expensive sandals and put on his old, comfortable ones. Then he went with his grandmother to the riverbank, where the clay was richest. Under Bibi Zawadi's patient instruction, Jabari learned the art that he had dismissed for so long. He learned how to feel the clay, to understand when it was too wet or too dry. He learned how to shape it with his hands, coaxing beauty from the earth through nothing but skill and patience. His fingers cramped and his back ached, but there was a satisfaction in the work that no amount of silver coins had ever given him. "Clay is honest," his grandmother told him as they worked side by side. "It will not lie to you. If you are rough with it, it will crack. If you are patient with it, it will become whatever you need. It is much like life and much like people." As the days passed, word spread through the village about Jabari's return to his grandmother's side. Some people gossiped and laughed, saying he had failed in his attempt to become rich. Others nodded with approval, recognizing the growth in the young man. One morning, as Jabari was setting up their table at the market, Kofi approached. The chief's son looked uncomfortable, glancing around as if afraid someone might see him talking to Jabari. "Why did you leave the feast? And why are you back here, playing in the mud like a child?" Jabari looked at the boy he had once envied, and he felt only pity. "I'm not playing, Kofi. I'm working. I'm creating something useful with my own hands. I'm spending time with someone I love, and I'm happy." "Happy?" Kofi scoffed. "You're poor. You have nothing." "I have everything that matters," Jabari replied calmly. He held up one of his grandmother's pots, a beautiful vessel with patterns that spoke of ancient stories. "This pot will hold water for a family. It will sustain life. Your golden bowls, for all their beauty, do nothing but collect dust on a shelf. Tell me, Kofi, which has more value?" Kofi had no answer. He turned and walked away, his expensive sandals clicking on the market stones, and Jabari felt no regret at his departure. Months passed, and Jabari became skilled in his grandmother's craft, but he also became something more. He became wise. He learned that true wealth was not measured in coins or cloth, but in the strength of relationships, the satisfaction of honest work, and the peace that comes from living according to one's values. He learned that a kind word to a struggling neighbor was worth more than a chest full of silver. He learned that the laughter shared over a simple meal was richer than any feast. He learned that the calloused hands of a craftsperson were more beautiful than the soft, idle hands of someone who had never worked. One day, a stranger came to their table at the market. He was clearly a man of wealth, dressed in fine robes and accompanied by servants. But unlike most wealthy people who passed by their modest display, this man stopped and examined our pots carefully. "These are excellent," he said, turning one over in his hands to examine its construction. "I am a trader from the coastal cities. I supply goods to many kingdoms. I would like to purchase all of your pots, and I would like to commission more. The quality of your work surpasses anything I have seen in many villages." Bibi Zawadi and Jabari exchanged glances. The trader offered them more money for a single order than they usually made in several months. "We accept," Bibi Zawadi said, "but on one condition. We will not rush our work. Each pot must be made with care and love, as our ancestors taught us. We will not sacrifice quality for quantity." The trader smiled, "And that is precisely why I want to work with you. Too many craftspeople have forgotten that their work is a reflection of their spirit. I can see that you have not." As the trader left with their current inventory and a promise to return in a month, Jabari turned to his grandmother with wide eyes. "Bibi, do you realize what this means? We will have money, real money. We could buy fine clothes, a larger house." His grandmother held up her hand, and Jabari fell silent. She looked at him with those wise, ancient eyes, and slowly she smiled. "And what would we do with fine clothes and a large house, my grandson? Would they make our pots more beautiful? Would they make our food taste better? Would they make our sleep more peaceful?" Jabari thought about this. He thought about the nights he had spent in his expensive dashiki, uncomfortable and worried about keeping it clean. He thought about the stress of trying to maintain appearances among Kofi's friends, always anxious about having enough money for the next social obligation, and he thought about the recent months. Simple, hard-working, but filled with a contentment he had never known when chasing wealth. "No, Bibi," he said quietly. "They would not." "Then we will use the money wisely," she said. "We will improve our workshop so we can create even better pots. We will share with neighbors who are struggling. We will save some for the seasons when work is scarce. And yes, perhaps we will buy one or two small comforts, but only those that serve a real purpose, not those meant to impress others." "You are truly wise, Bibi," Jabari said, embracing his grandmother. "No," she replied, holding him close. "I am simply old enough to know that the things that matter cannot be bought or sold. They can only be nurtured, like clay shaped between loving hands." From that day forward, Jabari and his grandmother's pottery business grew steadily. They never became wealthy in the way that the chief's family was wealthy, but they never went hungry. More importantly, they were respected throughout the land for the quality of their work and the integrity of their character. Jabari eventually took over the business when his grandmother grew too old to work. He married a kind woman who valued simple things, and together they raised children who understood the difference between price and value, between wealth and riches. He often told his children the story of his foolish youth, when he had chased after glittering things and nearly lost everything that truly mattered. And he always ended the story the same way. "Remember, my children, that a golden bowl may catch the eye, but it is the clay pot that catches the rain. One is made to be admired, the other to be useful. And usefulness, combined with love, is the truest form of wealth this world has to offer." Years later, when Jabari was an old man himself, He heard that Kofi had gambled away his father's wealth and died alone and bitter, surrounded by tarnished golden bowls that no one wanted to buy. The news made Jabari sad, not triumphant. He said a prayer for his former friend and then returned to his workshop, where his grandchildren were learning to shape clay with patient, loving hands. As he watched them work, their small hands mimicking the ancient patterns, Jabari thought about all the turns his life had taken. He thought about the boy he had been, desperate to escape poverty and convinced that money was the answer to every question. And he thought about the man he had become, rich in all the ways that truly mattered. That evening, as the sun set over the village of Kiboko, casting golden light across the baobab trees and the winding Mara River, Jabari sat outside his small house, now lovingly maintained but still modest, and felt a contentment so deep it seemed to rise from the earth itself. He had learned what his grandmother had tried to teach him so many years ago, that true wealth is not found in golden bowls or fine cloth, but in the love we give and receive, in the work of our hands, in the peace of our spirits, and in the knowledge that we have lived with integrity and purpose. The clay pot and the golden bowl both have their place in the world, but only one can hold the water that sustains life. Only one can be passed down through generations, becoming more valuable with age rather than less. Only one teaches us that the greatest treasures are those we create with our own hands and share with open hearts. And that, Jabari knew, was a lesson worth more than all the gold in all the kingdoms of the world.